is actually knocked out for a little bit. Hector's helmet does hold secure. He blacks out because Diomedes hit him. And ultimately, at last, the helmet will save him, right? And then we will have Paris, who comes back. It's fascinating the way Paris gets used in the Iliad. You'll want to pay attention to the very last times that we will see Paris in this text. Anytime Paris comes up, it's always fascinating. And it's almost always, I would put this in my notes at 2b, almost always it's ironic. Almost always it's ironic. And now we'll meet Paris again at line 440. Paris, clenching the grip and drawing back his bow, shot, no wasted shot, at Diomedes. It whizzed from his hand and punched the flat top of Diomedes' right foot. The shaft dug through and stuck fast in the ground. Let's just pause for a moment and point out how ironic this is, that Paris will kill Achilles later with the same kind of technique, shooting him in the foot. Notice here, it just wounds Diomedes. He'll even say it's just a scratch. But for Achilles, that scratch will be it all. By the way, just to point out, Hercules' son Philoctetes will kill Paris, according to later myth, will kill Paris as well with an arrow shot. Very interesting. Paris, as soon as he shoots Diomedes, loosing a heady laugh of triumph, Paris leapt from his hiding place, shouted out in glory, "Now you're hit! No wasted shot, my winging arrow, but would to God I'd hit you deep in the guts and ripped your life away. Then my Trojans would catch their breath again, reprieved from death. They cringed at you like bleeding goats before some lion." But never flinching, staunch Diomedes countered, "So, brave with your bow and arrows, big bravado, glistening lovelocks, roving eye for girls." Notice he uses plural. In other words, it's not even the singular for Helen, right? "Come," he says, "try me in combat, weapons hand to hand." We think immediately of what happened when he went up against Menelaus, right? "Bow and spattering shafts will never help you then. You scratch my foot." "'Tis but a scratch," is the Monty Python line. "You scratch my foot and you're vaunting all the same, but who cares? A woman or idiot boy could wound me so. The shaft of a good-for-nothing coward's got no point, but mine's got heft and edge. Let it graze a man. My weapon works in a flash and drops him dead. And his good wife will tear his cheeks in grief. His sons are orphans, and he, soaking the soil red with his own blood, he rots away himself. More birds than women flocking round his body." Whoa! So you've got a very interesting exchange which happens there, right? Odysseus then has to save Diomedes, and ultimately Odysseus is left alone. You know, this really interesting at 475 or so, you've got this really interesting kind of soliloquy of Odysseus. He probed his own great fighting heart, and he says this out loud. This will take us, of course, to Odyssey, Book 5, and a whole lot of other passages in Odyssey when Odysseus speaks out loud to himself. He likes this thing of soliloquizing. "Oh, dear God," Odysseus will say, "what becomes of Odysseus now? A disgraceful thing if I should break and run, fearing their main force. But it's far worse than I'm taken all alone. Look, Zeus just drove the rest of my comrades off in panic flight. But why debate, my friend? Why thrash things out? Cowards, I know, would quit the fighting now, but the man who wants to make his mark in war," we think of Cleos here, "must stand his ground and brace for all he's worth, suffer his wounds." Remember that Odysseus is the man of constant sorrows. "Suffer his wounds and wound his man to death." So in other words, there it is. Odysseus is trying to figure it out. He's wounded. He's saved by Athena, and then Menelaus, and then finally Ajax. And then we have Ajax's Aristeia. Ajax will kill a lot of people, followed by Hector killing more people. And then we have the really important moment when Paris will wound Machaea. And that's an important moment, right? We're at line 598 or so, right? "Still the Achaeans never would have yielded before the prince's charge if Paris, the lord of lovely fair-haired Helen, had not put a stop to Machaean's gallant fighting." We have an Aristeia of Machaean. He's a healer, but he's also fighting. "Striking the healer squarely with an arrow," another arrow shot, "triple flamed that gouged his right shoulders. Achaeans breathing fury, feared for Machaean now. What if the tide turned and Trojans killed the healer?" I mean, you can kind of ask the question, why would the healer be out there on the battle lines, but yet there he is. It also tells us just how bad things are for the Greeks, right? Nestor has to save Machaean and take him back. That will be significant in a second. Ajax is left alone and blocking the Trojans. And then we're told that the great young Greek warrior Eurypylus will come up to protect Ajax. And this, we'll say at 3b, at 3a, will remind us of that passage from Beowulf 3, when Wiglaf comes up to help Beowulf fighting against the dragon. I'm at line 675 or so. But Eurymon's shining son, Eurypylus, saw Ajax there, and overwhelmed by the Trojans' dense barrage of spears, up to his side he dashed and flanked great Ajax tight, let fly with a spear, and the glinting spear point will hit Pasion, one of the Trojans, right? And so then Paris will wound Eurypylus. So Paris has his work cut out for him, and before he thinks he's going to die, Eurypylus will scream to the rest of the Greeks, "Save Ajax! Save him!" Right? Now all of this has been going on, and I tried to move through it quickly. I wish I could have read it all, but it is supposed to kind of be moved through quickly. You're supposed to get this sense that there's this unbelievable amount of chaotic struggle and fighting that's going on. And so we're told at line 705, they fought like a mass of swirling fire, as Neleus' foaming mares bore Nestor clear of battle, and bore Macian, the expert healer, too. But now, the brilliant runner Achilles watched and marked him. There he stood on the stern of his looming, hollow hull, looking out over the uphill work and heart-sick rout of war. Achilles is getting what he wanted. All the Greeks are getting jacked, right? He called at once to his friend in arms, Patroclus, shouting down from the decks. Hearing Achilles, forth Patroclus came from his shelter, striding up like the deathless god of war. But from that moment on, his doom was sealed. Line 714. Now that's a significant moment for us, because of course here it is the case that, well, whose doom is sealed? This may be the most ironic line in all of the Iliad. Certain scholars have certainly suggested as much, because from that moment on, his doom was sealed. Achilles calling to Patroclus, Patroclus saying, "What do you want?" And yet the line is ambiguous as to who is the actual antecedent to this pronoun, his doom. Well, you could argue that it's Patroclus' doom. That is to say, Patroclus is going to die. Of course, you could also argue that it is also Achilles' doom. Some of my students have pointed out there's a third antecedent here, and that is, of course, Hector. Hector's doom is sealed as well in this moment, right? Of course, there is another that says the city of Troy's doom is sealed in this moment as well, right? The brave son of Mnestheus spoke out first. "Why do you call, Achilles? Do you need me?" And the swift runner Achilles answered quickly, "I need you to go down, and I need you to find out who that injured person was. I think," he says, "I think I know who it was, but I need you to check on Macian and find out what's going on," right? And sure enough, that's exactly what he does. Patroclus then will go and find Nestor. I'm at line 765 or so. Old Nestor seized Patroclus at once. He started up from his polished chair, warmly grasped his hand, and led Patroclus in, pressing him to sit. But, standing off to the side, his guest declined. "Patroclus, no time to sit, old soldier dear to the gods. You won't persuade me. Awesome and quick to anger, the man who sent me here, Achilles, to find out who's been wounded, the one you've just brought in. But I can see him. I recognize Macian myself, the expert healer. So back I go to Achilles, the message. Well, you know, old soldier loved by the gods, what sort of man Achilles is. That great and terrible man. Why, he'd leap to accuse a friend without a fault. In other words, I gotta hurry and get back." You get this sense that Patroclus is a little bit worried to be gone from Achilles for very long. But Nestor, the noble charioteer, replied at length, and it is almost always going to be at length when Nestor talks, right? Old men, when they start talking, some of you will roll your eyes and say it's kind of like McGee when he starts giving these stupid lectures. "Nestor, now why is Achilles so cast down with grief for this or that Achaean winged by a stray shaft?" In other words, why would Achilles start caring about people who are wounded now? He has no idea of the anguish risen through the army. That's a key line. By the end of this book, Patroclus will have some idea. It will become personal for Patroclus here very quickly. He has no idea of the anguish risen through the army. Look, our finest champions laid up in the ships are all hit by arrows or run through by spears. There's powerful Diomedes brought down by an archer, Odysseus wounded, and Agamemnon too, the famous spearman. And Eurylochus took a shaft in the thigh. And here, Martian, I just brought him in from the fighting, struck down by the arrow whizzing off the string. But Achilles, brave as he has no care, no pity for our Achaeans. How long will he wait till our ships that line the shore go up in flames, gutted, despite a last-ditch stand, and we ourselves are mowed down in droves? And I, what good am I, Nestor continues. My limbs are gnarled now, the old power's gone. Oh, make me young again, and the strength inside me steady as a rock. And it's at this point now that we're going to get Nestor's Aristeia. It's a long speech where he basically celebrates the fact that when he was young, he could jack, okay? And so I'll let you read that one on your own. I wish I had time to read it. It's wonderful. But at the very end of it, it's a fascinating line. At the very end of it, right at about 907 or so, he says, "Such was I in the ranks of men." He celebrates himself. But then there's this interesting line. Question, or was it all a dream? Right? And then he continues, "This Achilles, he'll reap the rewards of that great courage of his alone. I tell you, weep his heart out far too late." I mean, this is unbelievable foreshadowing, right? Weep his heart out far too late. Think about who he's talking to, Patroclus. "When our troops are dead and gone, my friend, remember your father's last command? That day he sent you out of Phthia to Agamemnon. We were both there inside. I and Prince Odysseus heard it all in the halls. All your father told you." And there's this bit of more story for Nestor about, do you remember when Odysseus and I came and you and Achilles were together and we told you about this fight here at the walls of Troy and invited for both of you to come? He even continues at line 931, "And once we had our fill of food and drink, I led off with our plan, inviting the two of you, Achilles and Patroclus, to come campaign with us." Here in this passage, by the way, we find out that Patroclus is actually older than Odysseus. "How willing you were, and your fathers filled your ears with marching orders. The old horseman Peleus urging his son Achilles, 'Now always be the best, my boy, the bravest, and hold your head up high above the others.' And Actor's son Minthius urging you, 'My child, Achilles is nobler than you with his immortal blood, but you are older,' the father of Patroclus told Patroclus. 'He has more power than you by far, but give him sound advice, guide him even in battle. Achilles will listen to you for his own good.' So the old man told you." And then the famous line, "You've forgotten," Nestor says. "But even now, late as it is, you could tell your Achilles all this, and your fiery friend might listen. Who knows? With a god's help, you just might rouse him now. Bring his fighting spirit round at last." The ironies, of course, are deep here, right? "The persuasion of a comrade has its powers, but if deep down some prophecy makes him balk, his fate that he's going to die if he continues in the war, some doom his noble mother revealed to him from Zeus, at least let Achilles send Patroclus into battle. Let the whole Myrmidon army follow your command. You might bring some light of victory to our Argives, and let him give you his own fine armor to wear in war, so the Trojans might take you for him, Patroclus. Yes, hold off from attack, and Achaea's fighting sons get second wind, exhausted as they are. Breathing room in war is all too brief. You're fresh, unbroken. They're bone weary from battle. You could roll those broken Trojans back to Troy, clear of our ships and shelters." So old Nestor urged, and the fighting spirit, we're told, leapt inside of Patroclus, and he dashed back by the ships toward Achilles. However, before he gets there, he finishes by running into the wounded Eurypylus, and he speaks with him. The brave Patroclus answered quickly to Eurypylus, "Impossible, Eurypylus, hero. What shall we do? I am on my way with a message for Achilles, our great man of war, the plan that Nestor, Achaea's watching ward, urged me to report. But I won't neglect you, even so, with such a wound." And at the very end now, when it has come personal for Patroclus, he will now be convinced he has to do something. If Achilles isn't going to do anything, at least he will. Obviously, the question is, when Nestor makes this recommendation to Patroclus, does Nestor have some sense that Patroclus is not the fighter that Achilles is? Patroclus will probably end up getting either wounded or killed. That will bring Achilles into the war. Does Nestor know that? We, of course, know that. And the poet is going to make sure that we recognize the irony. Hey, let's jump to levels 2 and 3 quickly. At 2a, well, obviously, there's a number of messages here. Things matter, for example, for Patroclus, only when they become personal, right? Innocence, also another message. Innocents often pay, think about this, for the actions of others. Patroclus, in the end, is going to pay for this decision of Achilles to have his pride wounded and all of that. How about this one? A true hero. We see this several times in this book. A true hero sacrifices for the good of others, which begs the question, do you think of Achilles as a true hero? We'll get there in a second. At 2b in symbols, well, you can think about Hector's helmet as an interesting symbol. It will save him, but in the end it will doom him, won't it, right? And we can think about Paris's arrow as another powerful symbol. Think about Zeus's rope. That's a powerful picture, word picture, isn't it, right? That taunt rope. How about Machian's wounding as a symbol? That will, of course, translate into our second 2b focus, irony. Think about the fact that a doctor needs a doctor. Think about the fact that Achilles will send for Patroclus, and then we've got that line as we were talking about it, right, just a few seconds ago. That is the line of all lines. From that moment on, his doom was sealed, right? From that moment on, it's over, isn't it? Interesting, ironic kind of understanding. At 3a, I mentioned it, let's put it in our notes again. When we study our Beowulf, when we go to Beowulf 3, Beowulf is going to die, and the dragon is going to kill him. And the warriors that Beowulf has asked to help him all run away in fright, but it is Wiglaf who comes back and stands by his king, stands by Beowulf, and we'll see that same kind of thing happening obviously here, right? When Ajax is ready to go down, he needs the younger Euryalus to help him. What are some other texts where the lesser helps the stronger? And that kind of is important the way it works out. Some of you have said already after several of these lectures that almost every book of this Iliad somehow relates to Tolkien's Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, right? And of course that's true. Some of you know that text primarily through Peter Jackson's classic films, right? At 3b, how about this one? What's a time in your life, looking back now, when one innocent act, Achilles asks Patroclus, hey, would you go check on Marcian and find out what's going on, is going to start a string of negative events that will culminate in a really tragic event. Can you think about one like that? That is to say, when it happened at the moment, it was completely innocent, no big deal. But by the end, when you look back, you kind of go, there's something going on there. Well, that's book 11. We turn now to book 12, and of course we'll be halfway through the Iliad of the 24 books. But really now, from books 12 through 15, we're going to have the Trojans who are going to take over, and they will pretty much destroy the Greeks. That will lead to Patroclus deciding to enter the war. Ultimately, by book 16, we will have Patroclus' death, and of course then the culminating collateral damage to follow. Let's go ahead now and turn to book 12. Thank you.